morning and welcome to this week's special edition episode of Long Story Short. We are coming to you live from Devex World in downtown Washington, D.C. I'm Kate Midden, your host, here with Courtney Brooks, managing editor of the Devex newsroom, to talk about some of the biggest conversations that we're hearing today. Courtney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's a very exciting day.
It is a very exciting day. You can feel a lot of buzz in the atmosphere. So I do want to start just kind of giving a broad look. We're coming up on being about halfway through the day. We've had a number of really interesting conversations. We have a lot of global development leaders on site. What are some of the biggest conversations that you've seen today, that you've heard, that you're looking forward to?
There are so many different things happening today, but I'll focus on kind of the 4 or 5 of the biggest conversations that are happening. And these are issues that really the Devex news team is focusing on at all times, every day, and we're looking towards what's happening next in each of these issue areas versus just what's happening today. The first one is education. So that conversation is kind of going to focus on why there hasn't been as much of a really well-funded and multi-pronged and global response to the learning crisis as we've seen in some other areas, such as global health.
This is something that we report on quite a bit of, how do you kind of build movements in that direction to get more financing for things like education?
Yeah, exactly. And that conversation is also really going to focus on sort of the education crisis among girls in particular. And it's also going to look at, not just all the children that are out of school, but kind of the development community waking up to the fact that just because someone is in school doesn't mean that they're necessarily getting a good education. And there are so many students who are graduating without kind of basic skills, basic reading skills, basic, et cetera. We're also going to be looking at global health, and we're going to be examining, one of the big topics there is looking at NCDs and how do we approach the fight against non-communicable diseases alongside also continuing the fight to eradicate malaria and TB and other communicable diseases.
Something we're focusing on quite a bit at Devex. I mean, we have a big ongoing campaign around NCDs, something that we just pay a lot of attention to.
Right.
So good to see it unfold here at Devex World.
Yeah, exactly. And I think kind of the one of the big issues that we're looking at in global health as well is examining whether or not, and this is what we're talking about today also, is examining whether or not patients are truly at the center of these programs and investments, and if not, how do we get there?
I would do a quick plug that our reporter Jenny Lee Ravello is actually leading that conversation later on today, and it will be live streamed. We will drop the live stream link in the comments.
And then I would be remiss to not mention both that we're looking at private capital in development as well, sort of the barriers to that and when that should be used and different sort of ethical issues around that perhaps. And then also, of course, looking at the conversation of the year, data and ethics.
So tricky.
Yes.
We've already heard from a couple leaders on this morning. I mean, what were the big takeaways from you? Who did we hear from, and what were the big takeaways on the data privacy conversation?
So in actually the first conversation this morning, Priya Vora, who's the CEO of Future State, made a couple points which I thought were extremely insightful, and actually even to me they weren't, not necessarily things that I've thought about before in this conversation. And basically, I think we all assume that once data has been collected, that company just owns it forever. And she raised the point of if someone's data is wrong, should there be processes or systems in place for that person to dispute it? And then also, should consumers be able to take their data elsewhere if they're not satisfied with the services that they're receiving? And I just thought that was like a really fascinating take on data.
Yeah, I agree. One point that she made that I thought actually it brought about applause in the room, which she said, consenting is not enough.
Yeah.
Consenting is not enough. So we heard from her. We also heard from the founder of Tala, a big financial inclusion company that's just doing phenomenal work. And she talked about the data they collect on people in order to kind of optimize their own platform to be more effective, to just glean really important insights. And the way that she spoke about them, it highlighted the importance of data and of using it, but then also said that we collect about, 10,000 data points on a given person that are mostly about behavior.
Yeah.
So interesting to see how those square.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was Shivani Soroya. And I thought that, it's still relatively early in the day. There are a lot of speakers that we're going to hear from, but that panel was with Shivani and Jaha Dukara. I thought that was just extremely inspirational. And so Shivani was kind of, talking about data for good, the use of data for good, and looking at how, in her organization in particular, provides sort of micro loans to entrepreneurs and people around the world who might not have otherwise have access to financial systems. And one of the things they do, like the point of collecting data for them, is to provide consumers with credit scores. I just thought that juxtaposition was kind of fascinating in that talk in particular.
Certainly. You did bring up Jaha, who spoke this morning, who's an FGM activist from the Gambia. It was wildly inspirational. One of the big takeaways for me was when she talked about how when she started getting really involved in activism for anti-FGM in 2013, everyone just shouted her down, gave her a really hard time, and then she came back a few years later and was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for that work. What were your big takeaways from that? As far as like the actual session, but also activism.
I think sort of that session really focused on, in particular these two women, but like the development community at large, kind of questioning who's working in development, who should be working in development, and ensuring that people are sort of empowered and are empowered to work in their own communities and improve their own communities. And Jaha in particular spoke to that and said that, we need African women leading the fight against FGM in Africa. That's how it's taken seriously. That's going to be the best approach. And that also garnered applause. And I think like that conversation is really the subtext to every conversation today, is sort of re-examining that approach in development and ensuring that the right people are working on these issues.
Certainly. Is there anything in particular that you've been surprised by today?
Yeah, again, going back to Shivani, I wouldn't necessarily say that this stat completely shocked me, but the context for it did. So she, raised the point that only 30% of adults in the world are registered with a credit bureau. And I don't think that in and of itself is surprising, but I had never thought about the fact that that means that 70% of people in the world are really not financially empowered. And so that was sort of she spoke about all the different steps her organization wants to take to financially empower people, but that is like the first crucial step, is ensuring that people can actually access any kind of financial institution, and they need a credit score in order to do that.
It feels like there's a lot to be celebrated in the movement that's been made towards getting more people or movement on financial inclusion, but it did highlight kind of the road ahead as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So bringing it kind of back to here where we are now, this venue, we have flown in, our reporters are here from all over the world. They're, you can find them everywhere. Where are they? For anyone who's watching who might want to get in touch with our reporters today, what are they doing?
They're all over the place.
Because you oversee all of them.
Yeah. We have, I would say probably about 15 or 20 different reporters. The reporters at Devex are like truly experts in international development and are kind of spread across the venue right now, covering different panels, different sessions, interviewing some of the thought leaders who are here today. And yeah, they've come from all over the world to be here, and it's like a really exciting opportunity for everyone to connect with different experts in the field.
Yeah, we had Associate Editor Voss Aldinger this morning interviewing Ray Washburn, who's the new head of OPIC. We mentioned Jenny Lee Ravello, who's going to be overseeing a track later on today. Sophie Edwards, who's doing the storytelling to movement building track. I guess if anyone wants to get in touch or has questions, they can go ahead and tweet our reporters. I believe that they are all on Twitter. We are about out of time, but any final takeaways that you want to share for today, or anything about the future of global development and what that means for our reporting?
I I guess I sort of already highlighted it, but I think the future of the global development conversation is really who is working in development and why. And as Jaha said in her talk this morning, this is not a career for her. This is like
her life.
This is her life. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the focus of today's work, and it's going to be the focus of the conversation development for the next couple of years until the next Devex World.
Well, Courtney Brooks, managing editor of the Devex Newsroom, thank you so much for joining us, and follow the conversation using #DevexWorld.
Thank you.